Hello and welcome to Indo GAA. I'm delighted to be joined by Dick Clerkin and Pat Spillane to look back on what was an exhilarating weekend of football action. Pat, just as an overall, what a weekend between Saturday and Sunday. You couldn't have written some of the drama that unfolded.
No, this year's football championship continues to give, and last weekend was no different. It was exceptional. Saturday's games, you had the shock of Kerry's defeat by Meath. The other three games were one-score games. The two Tailteann Cups quarterfinals on Saturday, one-score games. You had then, of course, the cracking game, not a cracking game, but a really enthralling and intriguing game, Donegal and Mayo. You had Galway's last gasp pint from Shane Walsh to win the game. It was just brilliant football. And let's mention also Wicklow shocking.
Yeah.
Meath coming from 5 points down to win the game against Westmeath. And Limerick, who in 2024 never won a game and are now going to Croke Park for the second time this year. So it's been a great football championship. And, and the pity about it is that because it's so fast and so condensed and it's over and done with, that so many of the highlights and so many of the great matches will be forgotten about at the year's end. And just off the top of my head, what were the highlights? The shock wins for for Meath and for Wicklow. That was brilliant. The kick-outs from Cluxton and Patton, unreal, laser-like. The performance of Brian Minton rolling back the years by Meath. Colm Reap's last-minute save from Paddy McBrearty's goal. Pat Haveron's 12 points for down, unbelievable. Ethan Rafferty's 7 points from goals from Armagh. Ian Maguire being majestic for Cork at midfield. And I leave the best wine to last because I really, really enjoyed the Monaghan Down game. I thought everything that's good about Gaelic football was in display. Brilliant attacking football and the new rules absolutely shown to perfection. And I remember it was brilliant attacking football. And I love attacking football. And the stat that stood out from the first half, 34 shots at goal by both teams in the first half, 17 shots at goal by each of them. It was just a brilliant weekend of top-class matches, twists and turns, excitement, and you couldn't but be happy. If you wanted to find fault, Jesus, you'd be searching deeply.
Pat, on the rare occasions that you leave your house and you're not watching live sport, I presume people are coming up to you talking about football. Isn't it amazing how the difference in 12 months, the attitudes and the conversations and the perceptions of what football is now?
You go to matches and everyone is talking about they've fallen back in love with Gaelic football. They're now going to Gaelic football matches again after years that they fell out of love with. Players tell me they love the game. I was in a Skillin on Saturday evening. There was 5,000 people, close to 5,000 people at the Tailteann Cup quarter-final between Sligo and Fermanagh. And I met so many Fermanagh people, so many Sligo people, and they're buzzing. They're happy to be supporting their counties, but they're happy to be going to games where it's top-class entertainment. It was very, very enjoyable. Actually, two useless things to get off my chest. Actually, I met Dick's mother in Enniskillen after the game. Yeah. A very glamorous lady. And, obviously, Dick didn't. He got his looks from Hugo, but that's neither here nor there.
You're doing all right there. You're doing all right. Keep going.
A lovely Fermanagh lady. And sorry, while I'm at it, Michael, Jesus, with you two, a bone to pick. I was reading an article the other morning. I said, Jesus, this is very nice. I love Pat Spillane. And then it fell apart. Michael Verney then, a journalist called Michael Verney said, I love Pat Spillane. And then, having damned me with faint praise, pulled the rug from under him, says, I pretty much disagree with most things he said. So look, it was a great weekend.
Goodbye, Verney.
Just lads, there were two things I want to get off.
I think what I actually said, Pat, was I love Pat Spillane, but I tend to agree with as much of what he says as I disagree with. So that's 50-50.
You know what you're saying when you're defending, you're losing, mate. When you're defending, you're losing.
By mentioning your name, Pat, the article immediately got more traction anyway. That's all. That's
some work colleague to have. Some work colleague to have.
Dick, just quickly on the overall point of the weekend, isn't it great that what we're talking about is so positive and falling from one group to the next group to the next group on Sunday to the next group on Sunday again, and it was just one kind of drama-fueled game and moment to the next.
And it's the not to use it too tech, it's the consistency of it. Like at the start of the year, if we all remember back those first rounds of the league, you're going, oh God, that was good, that was interesting. God, I'd like some more of that. Or was it just we weren't too sure back then? Was it all going to slide as the year went on, as managers became a bit more cynical and tried to sort of corrupt the rules, and you weren't too sure? But now, like, we're into the middle of June, and just week on week, that's the game now. It's not just something that's going to pass by. It's not something that the rules are going to have to be tweaked further because managers are sort of trying to pick holes in them. There's across the board, be it the top tier All-Ireland contenders, as Pat says, right down to the Tailteann Cup hopefuls, that everybody has embraced it, and the product and the game itself has just fundamentally changed in such a relatively short time. It is absolutely phenomenal. Like I was in Newry I was in Armagh on at the weekend on Sunday afternoon, and I'm struggling to remember being at a sporting event, a game that I was so engaged in and bloody exhausted at the end of it as a spectacle. Like as you said, you talked about Armagh as a venue. Like the ground was packed. There was families there. It was your perfect Sunday. And we would have had loads of those over the last 10 years. And then the game was a complete turkey. And there was no, this was just from the minute the ball was thrown in. I know sometimes these things from TV don't translate. Like, I don't know what it was like watching it, but it was just,
it translated very well.
Brilliant.
To the end of the game, I sort of gave up on my maths, and I was saying to my mother and father, I says, "What's in it? I just can't keep up here." And it was breathless. And I met Rory. I was golfing yesterday evening, and who did I meet coming off the 18th was Rory Beggan. He's up golfing, and he does that now on a Monday. I said, Rory, I don't know about you, I'm still exhausted from watching it. What was it like to be involved in it? And we had a chat for 10, 15 minutes. And Rory's very casual and sort of laid back. And he just said, listen, it was just fantastic. And they're all looking forward to the next round. And it was just, but like every game's like that. As you say, that was my experience, that everyone going around the country was at their own game. And to the point that even if Monaghan had lost, it was still such a fantastic occasion and contest to be involved in, because there was nothing between the teams. There was a bounce of a ball and stuff like that. And I just thought it was a credit to the teams, a credit to everybody involved, that's what the game is now. And I know we sort of have to stop saying that now, just look to the games, but at the same time, because it's turned around so quickly, it is so striking when you're going to match day experiences from what it was. And it's just a privilege to be at them, to be involved in, to have a team in it, and to be sitting here talking about it, because it's such a transformation. It's remarkable,
Yeah, just there's so many different dramatic moments, Pat, but we'll start with Donegal and Mayo. My God, how a game and a season can change within a couple of seconds if Patton doesn't get the kick out away. Listen, I straight up, and I think it's happened a couple of times in the last couple of years. I'm thinking back to the Dublin game a couple of years ago in the group stages. Surely, I don't like to rag on Mayo, but surely they've learned that, geez, maybe you need to pull a fella down, or maybe you need to halt momentum here. Like, there's no way Moore should have been let go the length of the field, realistically, to kick the winner that puts Mayo out of the championship. And I know they did so much good, but those moments at the end, they're under the microscope even more. And it's just mad to think that Boland kicks this point off the outside of his right, levels it up, Mayo are through, and then seconds later the same thing happens again and they're gone.
I know, it was just like, in terms of quality, it probably wasn't one of the top games of the weekend. It was very much for long spells a cagey sort of game. Now, a lot of people take pleasure in when Mayo lose and they have a pop at them and they're just perennial losers and do. I'm not going to fall into that trap. I really admire everything about Mayo football and this Mayo football team. I thought last Sunday, the warrior-like spirit was there, the character was there, the high press, the tackling, the turnovers, looked to be drifting. The game seemed to be drifting away from them in the second half, playing against the wind. And they showed great character to come to equalise with seconds to go. Fergal Boland, brilliant score. But the sad reality is that winners get the right to history, and Mayo yet again lost. And despite a gallant display, there are no medals handed out in the GAA or any other sport for gallant displays. When we talk about, there's a list that you never want to be on, and that's like the greatest teams to never win in All-Ireland, or the greatest players to never win in All-Ireland. And sadly, there'll be a lot of Mayo teams and a lot of Mayo players on this list. I look at two reasons why they lost, and the main one, which I keep saying year in, year out, and that's the forward failings that I saw again last Sunday. And in particular in the first half, I saw no plan, there's no movement, there's no tempo, no one taking responsibility, too often past the parcel version, poor decision-making, poor option-taking. And you look at the first half, they have the majority of possession, they're playing with the wind. And in that first half, they had 10 shots at goal, 8 shots from play. That's not good enough. And you look at the championship stats, only once in this year's championship have Mayo had more than 30 shots at goal. So that reluctance to shoot, that reluctance to get the ball into players in scoring position still comes back to, it's their Achilles heel. And the second thing is, what's Einstein say about the theory of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You go back to last year, Dublin versus Mayo, Mayo winning by a point, last kick out to Dublin. Surely there's a plan. And yet, I think, was it off the top of my head, was it Conor or Kieran Kilkenny, unopposed, catches the ball, sets up a move, and Cormac Costello points the ball over the bar. Like, what should have been done? You should have been cynical. You should have pulled down Con, prevented the run, prevented the jump, prevented the kick out, slowed down. And the same last week. Naivety. You'd have stopped Patton from taking a quick kick out. You'd have upset him. You'd have got in his eye line. You'd have pulled and dragged. You'd have pushed. You'd have forced a free. But instead, they were naive. Now, they were unlucky in one sense because the ball did bounce. It was going to Brendan McCall. The ball bounced over Brendan McCall's head, went to Kieran Moore. But you got to admire the character of these Donegal players, because at the time, irrespective of whether they drew the game or won the game, they were going to be finishing in second place.
Yeah.
But God forbid, if Kieran Moore was turned over and Mayo went up the field and scored and won by a point, Mayo would now be top of the table, and Donegal would be ranked 3 and could be heading away to Kerry this Sunday. So you've got to admire the confidence, the belief in the character of this Donegal team, and in particular Kieran Moore, that showed the guts and balls, go for the goal and score. But it was a really cracking game, and you do feel sorry for Mayo, but sadly.
What do you reckon, Dick?
Nah, I'm sorry, mate. I was a big Mayo supporter, and I went and I got called out, I think, a few times from Dublin players for cheering them in Croke Park because you're invested in them. But to be honest, the year they lost against Tyrone, I said I checked. I checked. I said, "Boys, I'm done with this." I said that was it. That was the one to win. I've gone.
And you persevered with McElroy. You never checked it, but you checked out with Mayo.
Checked out, and you know what? A lot of Mayo ones checked out. They haven't recovered from that, and I genuinely believe it. That the same love for Mayo, even within the county, hasn't been there since that. And I think that has lingered, and that's manifested itself in a lot of games since. And like you got to learn, like you got to sort of stop dancing around the head of the pin. Like, well, I can't remember what All Ireland final. Remember the Dublin beat them, and Dean Rock hit the last minute free, and next thing the Dublin players just dragged every Mayo player to the ground and a complete, excuse me language, shithousery to do what you had to do, and it was insightful. But you done what you got to do. I think
Costello kicked the ball off the tee as well.
The ball
at one
away.
stage.
There was boys dragged. I was at the game. I was looking down, and I said, "Just look at what they're doing. They don't care. They've been ruthless because that's what winners do. They're ruthless." And I done it in my time. I remember playing it, and I'm putting myself up at that level. But I'm talking about the psychology of what you do in those moments. I remember we were playing Cavan in an Ulster semi-final in Clonus. And I'd come on for the last 20 minutes. We were poor. We got it back. We got to a 2-point lead. There was 3 minutes left. And I said, well, these boys have to score twice now to beat us. And I just grabbed the boy beside me and I dragged him to the ground. And I said, I'm going to take a yellow card here. I'm going to kill a minute and a half on the clock. And I said, they ain't going to kick 2 points in a minute. And they didn't. And I said, I just done what I had to do. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't sportsmanlike or whatever it was. But at the end of the day, Mayo have to stop being gallant losers and do what it has to do to fucking win. And they didn't do it.
The common denominator,
and that annoys me looking at it, and you know what, it annoys people now looking at it, that they don't have that killer ruthlessness, cynicism that the best teams in any sport have.
Yeah, I would agree with Dick. The common denominator in all those big match defeats is, in many occasions, going down the last quarter in the finishing stretch, the game at their mercy, the game to be won, and they just got blinded by headlights. They were like rabbits dazzled in headlights, where they lacked leadership, their game management was poor, their decision-making was poor, their composure was poor. They just didn't, it's the great thing about the Dublin team down through the years, that their game management in the final quarter, their ability to grind out a victory, even when playing badly, was brilliant. Mayo game management in the final quarter was non-existent, and they just didn't know how to win, and they didn't know how to see out a game and hold that lead. And like I said, the winners write the history, and Mayo haven't won.
Pat, can I just throw a quick one at you? From what I can see scrolling through Twitter after the game on Sunday and even into Monday, there seems to be an onslaught coming from certain quarters aimed at Michael Murphy. I suppose this idea of him being a media darling and being immune to criticism, and apparently, like, after the game, he jogged and got into the dressing room fairly quickly, which, Jesus Christ, I've seen him out on the pitch for hours after games, and they had a big journey ahead of them. So I'd always give a lad a pass in that regard. But do you think he gets? Do you think he's put up a bit on a pedestal? And even people are saying, even by referees as well, that he gets away with things on pitches that others don't.
I thought some of the comments were quite petty, but I look at you look at two icons of the two teams, Mayo and Donegal, and you look at Aidan O'Shea and you look at Michael Murphy, and like the social media abuse that Aidan O'Shea has taken over the years, I don't think any player in Intercounty has got as much and doesn't deserve and not deserved. And again, I look on Aidan O'Shea, and we have been quoted here in the podcast how much I admire his leadership, his ball-winning ability. He's very much a team player. He's a role model. He's a superb player. Mayo management over the years, I don't think they got the best out of Aidan O'Shea. They didn't play him in the best position, and they didn't get the ball to him often enough. But he was, again last Sunday, he was absolutely magnificent, carrying the battle, taking the battle to Donegal. Jesus, he must be, I'm not too sure what the stats are, but he must be no different than Vicky Wall in the ladies' football, but he must be the most fouled person at inter-county level, and he doesn't get frees for it. So going to Michael Murphy, just quickly, Pat, because I saw as you did that yellow card that Vicky Wall got in the ladies' football. Oh my God, above! It wasn't even a physical. It was bare physical contact. There was no foul involved. But I watched her over the years, and because she's a big, strong, very athletic, brilliant footballer, she gets pulled up all the time if she hits into somebody and knocks her over. Michael Murphy was absolutely magnificent last week. His leadership, his decision making, his composure, he played as a point guard in that first half, and he dictated. He ran the show. And right, look, the bottom line is, if you're a winner, holy God, nice guys finish last. If you're a winner and you're on that, and everyone knows Michael Murphy. Michael Murphy is off the field, he's an absolute gentleman. Off the field, he's an absolute animal. It's a win at all costs. And I don't mean that in any derogatory fashion. That's what you have to be on the field. Winners are people who are horrible on the field, who will do anything to win the game, who will hit, who will be aggressive. And Michael Murphy is no different than any other player. No. And he ran off the field after the game. So what? In fairness, I've seen him, and you've seen him as well. I've seen him for hours on a field after the game. Like, they're a week away from another important match. Like, you need to get back into the dressing room. You need to get into recovery mode. You need to get into the zone for next week, not spend two hours on the field signing autographs. And it's brilliant. Look, I was on the field in Enniskillen for an hour last week, where the Fermanagh and Sligo players just mingled with their with their parents, mingled with their supporters, and just signed autographs and jerseys for an hour and a half. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, Dick just fired it. Murphy, yeah.
There's something irking Donegal. And there's not a coincidence that Michael Murphy done that, and then we had Jim McGuinness's rant in the media after. There's something they're not happy about, and that's another for me that the two of those are linked. That they're either pissed off that they didn't top the group and they know the consequences of that and the travelling, and it sort of sees that things have stacked up now against them because, as I said repeatedly, he came back to win an All-Ireland. Jim McGuinness is wanting to win an All-Ireland, and he knows now what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Number one, losing to Tyrone, the way the results went, they didn't top the group, the travelling, they're all compounding against them, and that, excuse me language again, that's pissing them off, and that's manifesting itself in a few things there, and that's not good for Donegal because they're probably, along with Armagh, one of the few teams that, and they don't get they I wouldn't be calling them out the same as Kerry losing to Meath or Dublin losing to Meath or Galway losing the game. Like, they lost that game to Tyrone, and they've done everything but win it in the last couple of minutes. It sort of was so they're right up there in terms of their performances to date, but now they've got a much more difficult group by comparison to Armagh, and that's obviously not part of the plan with Donegal. And yeah, that's not a good thing in the camp either. That's not a healthy. You don't want to be going into games and training with that siege mentality. It gets you so far, but it can be energy sapping as well. So, I was quite taken now with Jim McGuinness's rant after I listened to it back last night, and it sort of begs a question as to where that's coming from, because to be honest with you, a lot of what he said doesn't stack up at all. I think
look,
he's way off the mark.
Jimmy McGuinness's rant was classic Jimmy McGuinness. And I know well, it's Jimmy McGuinness creating that siege mentality, that everyone is against us. They hate the team, they hate the supporters, they hate Donegal. And you're right. I mean, first of all, it doesn't stack up because it's actually farther to travel from Belmullet to Roscommon than from Bundoran to Roscommon. So don't give me that. The venue, but that's a classic. Like I said, I know I was on the receiving end of that Jimmy McGuinness classic siege mentality creation back the year they won it. And I remember being on the Sunday game, and we were covering a game between an Ulster Championship game. Can't remember who it was. It was a dreadful game. Could have been Donegal and Antrim.
Antrim, that's right. Yeah.
It was Donegal and Antrim. It was as bad a championship game as you've ever seen. But of course, the fellas at the time said, this is a tactical revolution. This is intriguing and trawling. It was shite. But anyway, at the time, I was sort of a low on voice. But I remember giving out about the game. But my task at the end of the game was to pick man of the match. And I said, to be quite honest, there was no man of the match there. There was no one outstanding. This was a terrible game of football with very ordinary performances. But right, I have to pick a man of the match. So look, I'll pick Ryan Bradley. So I picked Ryan Bradley as man of the match, and he got... So anyway, that was fine until the following day. Of course, he comes out, Jim, this from the classic playbook, he comes out. Spillane, RT, we are demeaning Donegal. We demeaned his Ryan Bradley, his family, everything. And suddenly, I think as far as I know, they had a boycott they boycotted RT for a couple of weeks. But it was classic Jim, because he had created the siege mentality. The whole country hates us. RT hates us. The GAA hates us. And this is the way, and we're going to fight back. And so last Sunday's rant at the end of the game, about the venue in Roscommon, that was just it was a non-entity. And look, I mean, Dwyer was a classic in creating siege mentalities. Dwyer would tell us, and he was always ran. It's particularly in the end of the day, the 31 half counties were against us, or 31 and a half counties. Half our own county don't want us winning all Ireland titles. And you'd get revved up and you'd say, yeah, I'll go out and prove them wrong. No, Jim McGuinness, Jesus, it was a classic from his playbook of siege mentality rants.
Well, it was like I was listening to it and I was saying, right, okay, I've just listened. I said, this is first world problems if I ever heard. We played 7 championship matches. God, how many counties would love to be playing 7 championship matches? The travel, God, you have to go to Clonus to play semi-finals and Ulster finals, and now to Croke Park. Oh, the injustice. Correct me if I'm wrong. They went on a training holiday trip, didn't they, early in the year? Yeah. I'm sure that wasn't too easy on his players either. So maybe,
Dubai. to the nearby camp of Dubai. Just outside Dunlow.
maybe if they hadn't done that, they'd be fit to go on the bus another hour. So again, I think you got to take all that with a grain of salt. But I'm not sure it might feed into it, because they're going to need a wee bit of energy from somewhere, because as we said, the stats don't lie. The tougher route now for teams to go through the next 3 weeks and come out the other side and to be ready for a quarter-final or a semi-final. It's going to be tough. But listen, good luck to them.
Yeah, Donegal have allowed this weekend a repeat of last year's All-Ireland quarter-final up in Ballybuffet. Tyrone obviously topped the group. Of all the games last weekend, that's probably not one to focus on too much, but Darren McCurry is in some form, lads. Jesus Christ, he's absolutely flying it. But if we look back then at some of the drama on Saturday night, Galway and Armagh, Pat, we wondered how hard Armagh would go at this game. They went pretty hard at it by all accounts. But Galway, backs to the walls again. There's some entertainers. Jesus, the drama they've given us even this year alone, in their last 4 games alone, is unbelievable. And in fairness to Shane Walsh, when they needed him most, by God, did he deliver?
Yeah, it was. But it was it's still a game that I would put with question marks, because there was an element of shadow boxing. Because look, bottom line is, while Armagh obviously would like to win it, they weren't going all out to win it, because they rested their 3 leading scorers, as far as I can, off the top of my head. Grugan was rested, Oisin O'Neill was rested, and one was the 3rd leading scorer was rested. So look, they wanted to win, but they wanted to win by giving some of their impact subs, of their subs games. Yeah, you've got to admire Galway. Like I said, this is the bottom line. With all the teams that are left in the championship, say the top teams, I can still make a case for and against all the top teams. I know Armagh favourites. Would I rule out Galway? Would I rule out Dublin? Would I rule out Kerry even now? Would I rule out Tyrone? Armagh and a dark horse? There's so much to play for, and there's so much excitement ahead, because you couldn't rule out any of the top 6 or 7 teams. But what Galway did, and this is what you wanted, character. 8 points down at half-time. They missed 2 penalties. Well, scored a point with one. They missed 2 penalties. Not playing well, but showed great character. And look, come at the hour, come at the man. Form is temporary, class is permanent. Shane Walsh, what a classic point. And it was a game that I don't think we'll be talking much about in 2 or 3 weeks' time as regards a guideline for form. But yeah, good game of football, tough championship game of football, and a deserved victory for Galway.
Dick, a ballsy call by Joyce not to start Paul Conroy as well in the biggest game of the year, and it paid off, you'd have to say, because he was brilliant when he came in.
Yeah, and you're going to see that a lot, and we'll talk about Monaghan as well, and Gabriel Bannigan holding players back to the right time to make an impact, because games, all these big games now from quarterfinal stages on, they're going to be won in the last 10-15 minutes, and you got to have an impact. You got to have somebody that's bringing, just filling the job to run the lanes or whatever. He's going to make an impact and be fresh, and managers are going to have to look at their panel and say, well, who are those players? But whatever about Conroy, I was very... Yeah, they gave you right, Pat. There was an element that in that last 10-15 minutes, Armagh, if they won it, they won it. If they didn't, they weren't going hard to get the game back, and Galway done enough. There was a lot of pressure on Galway, so they had to still perform, whereas Armagh played with a bit of freedom. I was very interested with a few comments from both Joyce and Shane Walsh about Shane Walsh. I don't know if you remember, Shane, in his post-match interview, spoke about they had a meeting on the Tuesday night and after the last game. So we talked about it here last week, and I wrote about it that there was something up with Shane Walsh. That he wasn't performing. He wasn't either fit or he wasn't mentally tuned in, and it was probably causing a bit of a frustration for himself and Joyce. And there was obviously a bit of an intervention or a meeting of minds and say, here, come, where are you at? You got to step up. You're not delivering. Boys are relying on you. We're not performing the way you're playing. There was obviously a few home truths been spoken about, and Shane Walsh referenced that effectively in terms of what they expect of him and what he can deliver, because he delivered a completely different performance. I haven't seen a Shane Walsh performance like that, Mike, since the 2022 All-Ireland final. that he actually just shot the lights out. And that difference, if you look at some of the previous two games, he was getting the ball in similar positions, but he was taking a touch and he wasn't taking that, that extra burst to give himself that yard to take the point. Whereas at the weekend, he did. He sort of backed himself and he said, I'm going to take my man on, I'm going to create the space and I'm going to commit to the shot. And when he got those first few scores away off in the first half, there was the confidence and he kicked on from then. And he played like the Shane Walsh that he has made his name on in terms of that freewheeling confidence, left foot, right foot, beat your man. And that's and I'd say, that's, you have to sense that Walsh himself, Joyce, his teammates, and did you see after the match the amount of Galway players that went up to Walsh? Like they really embraced him. It was a case of, right, you delivered on what you promised you would on Tuesday night, which whatever it was, they spoke about that. And I'd say they're saying, right, we're back here and we've got our best man on board. So that was the most telling thing for me from the Galway performance. Not the result, but the performance of him, obviously, but the mindset shift that they got in him to get that performance.
And they're going to need more of that from him, and they're going to need more of that as a squad and that type of unity to go down the road that they're going to go, because it's going to be a tricky enough road. They obviously have Down away the next day, which from a Down point of view, you'd have to say was like that was the bogey draw to get. That was the one you didn't want to get. Just on the other game in that group, Pat, Derry's season is over. No win this year. No win, I think, from 13 games, 2 draws. Again, they were close again, but just you mentioned Cluxton briefly in the preamble at the start. All the question marks after the Meath game, and could he adapt to the new rules, and was he past his sell-by date? He's fairly blown them out of the water.
Yeah, but it was very simple. I mean, let's get Derry out of the way first. I mean, they've certainly been a very unlucky team because, as we alluded to, I think was it last week. Actually, did Hugo tip or did Dick tip Derry to beat Dublin out of the country?
He might have had, yeah. He might have had,
yeah. So I think I have 100% record so far, but anyway, that's it. But look,
100% record of the ones that you got right, yeah.
we know that Paddy Tally was. We know that they were late in appointing Paddy Tally, so it was always playing catch-up during the league. They were sort of unlucky during the league. They should have beaten Galway, should have beaten Kerry, and if they did, it could have been a different season. They got their act together, in fairness. I thought they got their act together during these 3 championship games. I mean, they were beaten by the Dubs by 2 points. They drew with Galway, and they were only beaten by 4 points by Armagh, and showed great character. I think they're in a good place. I think they're very, very unlucky. McCluskey was back last week as a sub. Shane McGuinness was back to top form, shooting 10 points. I probably wasted. They put Brendan Rodger marking Kieran Kilkenny, which I felt curtailed Brendan Rodger from his normal swashbuckling attacking role. But I think Paddy Tally, even though the stats don't lie, and it's been a difficult season for them, but I think they've been unlucky, and I think that they will have they're a serious team going forward for next year. Dublin. The one thing we said about the Dubs after their poor performance in the last game was where they kicked 17 wides and their kick out was terrible, and they had so many breaches of the technical rules. They were all things they could put right, and every mistake, and this is the good we talked about Mayo not learning from mistakes. Dublin, this is why they're great footballers. This is why they're a great team. They learned from their mistakes. Their shot execution much better than last day. I think it was only 7 wides the last day. The kick outs from Cluxton, unbelievable. There was no technical breaches. They were really impressive. But that last play from Cluxton and that young lad that came on, Jordan, who looked impressive as an impact sub, but to nail that kick out over to the Cusick stand side, it was absolutely brilliant. Dubs, don't be writing them off. There's failings, but there's failings and shortcomings in all the top counties. But Dublin now, from now on, in Croke Park,
Yeah, is it too simplistic, Dick, to say that Con O'Callaghan comes back into the team and Dublin just look a lot more composed, even the shot taking and execution that Pat's talking about there? I don't know, there was a lot more confidence in what they were doing. Is it too simplistic to say that when you have somebody like that in there, that a general can kind of just control things? Cluxton does it at one end of the field, he does it at the other.
It's not. It's just borne out in many teams that now they played with, Pat played with. There were certain players that not just what they contributed in terms of their possessions and scores and breaking balls, whatever they've done in terms of their own stats, but the impact they have on the players around them. And Conor O'Callaghan is unequivocally one of those players. So he's on the pitch playing well fit. He elevates the boys around him by 10-15%, both in his leadership and inspiration, but also his creativity, the runs that he makes. Intelligent players bring other players into the game in terms of the passes that he makes. When he gets a ball, he let a pass to somebody that the boy that was playing for them the previous week didn't make. All this sort of stuff adds up cumulatively to make them a 5-6 point a better team. And that's it. It's not simplistic. It's exactly what it says on the tin, Mike. The thing is for Dublin, and it just is a fact now, is that they have to play at their best. Like, they were an 8 or 9 out of 10 performance there at the weekend, and the same way as when they beat Galway. But they have to be at that now to beat any team by 2 or 3 points. Like in 5 or 6 years ago, an 8 or 9 or 10 performance by Dublin was blitzing teams by double digits. They're blowing them out of the water. So they have to play at that level of intensity in kick out efficiency, score, just to beat teams. And it's getting that game on game has been and will continue to be the challenge for Farrell going forward. But they know that. They'll accept that now, that they can't be anything but an 8 or 9 team. Now, even with the Cork game, that's a slippy enough one. Like Cork are strong, or Dublin are strong, so they will compete with them in the middle. They'll not dominate the midfield, or they potentially might not dominate the midfield in the same way as they did against Derry, because that's a strength of Cork. And Cork historically don't fear having a crack at Dublin either. I think it'll go the last 10-15 minutes in Dublin. The fact it's in Croke Park, but that won't be just straightforward potentially, because Cork have a bit of a tradition, and they're not bad. Like we've seen enough of them of how they've had a cut at Kerry. We'll come to them in a wee minute, albeit there might be an asterisk over them now. Sorry, Pat, but that Cork will bring something to that Dublin game and at least push them to the wire. But yeah, a good bounce back. I tipped Derry on the basis that if Dublin didn't bring that performance, that Derry team was good enough to beat them. The fact that Dublin came up the road with their house in order and delivered, Derry just weren't good enough, even though they put in a good shift themselves.
But you look at the positives from Dublin. Lee Gannon is back. Yeah. Owen Merchant reappeared the last day. And like I said, just the stats, 90% winning from the kickouts.
I didn't get to check the stats, so that's phenomenal.
90%. 8 points came from the kickouts. Only 4 turnovers in the second half. They restricted Derry to 3 points in the final quarter. If there's an asterisk over Dublin, 2 stats from last week: no goal scored, and no 2-pointer from play. Now, if you're going to be winning in All Ireland, those 2 stats won't be good enough.
Yeah, what that points to? You know what that points to, Pat? You go back to Jim Gavin's time. I'd say they never kicked a 2-pointer in all his time because they were told not to. And it's going back to basics, boys. We shoot from the high return area, because there's no point in hitting a glamorous wide from 50 yards. Hit it over from 30 yards, get it to the shooting area, and keep the score. So there's probably an element of going back to basics for that Dublin team, playing the football that they know and trust. Interesting.
You mentioned about the kick-out stats there. It was a real coming-of-age game for Peadar O'Cofaigh-Byrne, who's been in around that squad for a good while now at this stage, but he was brilliant at the weekend, in fairness. And as Dick says there, a tasty enough game against Cork, probably the tastiest of the 4 preliminary All-Ireland quarterfinals this weekend, realistically, and it's on at the same time. And make the logic out of this, it's on at the same time as Tipperary and Galway throw in the Gaelic grounds, which is live on terrestrial television. So makes sense of that. But we're about.
Will we quit the podcast now at this stage?
No, I'm just going to say we're nearly 40 minutes in, and we've managed to not really talk about Kerry. Pat,
Monaghan. Yeah, you give me 2.5 minutes.
I mentioned Monaghan already.
Pat, where does that performance rank among the dank Kerry performances?
Well, first of all, we have a slot here where I seem to criticise RT, it's the Sunday game, and GAA and GAA+. So just can I thank RT and GAA+ most sincerely for not showing any live television of the Kerry Meath game last week. For that, I am eternally grateful, because people missed watching probably one of the most listless, abject and poorest displays by Kerry in many years. What was the big problem? First of all, mentally, their attitude. They were completely off the pace. No aggression, no hunger, no appetite, no work rate. Like, they're the qualities you expect and demand from an under-10 team. They didn't have it. There was no energy. There was no appetite. There was no hunger. And then you go to the other stat and you look at, in the modern rules, the key in the modern rules, getting successful kickouts away, winning primary possession in the middle of the field, and dominating that middle third, picking up the breaking ball. Christ, they were destroyed at midfield. They were destroyed in the middle third. They weren't the half back line, midfield. Midfield were the worst performance in many years from a Kerry midfield pairing. I take it that, okay, there was no Diarmuid O'Connor, there's Ballydan is out injured, but it was the always half backs midfield terrible. I mean, if you look, that Meath middle third scored 113 out of Meath's 122. But you know, sorry, while we're just, I have to do it because you mentioned it. No preliminary quarterfinal on television.
Yeah.
Live TV screen next weekend. Absolutely crazy. Two big matches, as you alluded to, Dick. Two big championship matches this weekend on at the same time. Dublin versus Cork and Tipperary versus Galway in the hurling. Both on at 6:15 on a Saturday. Surely, God, you could do better than that. And spare a thought for the Limerick GAA supporters. Limerick are in Croke Park. The Limerick hurlers are in Croke Park on Saturday, playing Dublin in what is supposed to be Dublin, a neutral venue. But anyway, Limerick playing Dublin in hurling. And the following day, the Limerick supporters are asked, oh, lads, come up again tomorrow, because on Sunday, your footballers are playing in the semi-final at Celtic Cup. Talk about stupid planning.
Yeah, can I just say something, or Pat, can I just say something? I think it's interesting as well. The CCCC came out yesterday saying about why Donegal games couldn't be played in certain venues. Limerick are playing in Croke Park at 4 o'clock while hosting a game in the Gaelic grounds at 6:15 the same evening. So that kind of blows that theory out of the water. Last Saturday, Offaly played in Newbridge, thrown in at 6 o'clock, and the Kerry game threw in a couple of hours before that in Tullamore. So that kind of blows that theory out of the water as well.
Actually, by the way, and when we're on about the lack of promotion, I mean, and I know it's a perennial problem, but last Sunday evening, the minute that blockbuster game between Donegal and Mayo finished, the draw for the preliminary round should have been made. What would have happened? Maximum TV audience, maximum publicity generated. But instead, 20-9 on a Monday morning. But this is the key point I want to mention. If the draw, outside of the publicity and outside of the publicity and the marketing on a Sunday, if the draw was made on a Sunday, right, then county boards and supporters have an extra day to prepare. You think now, on a Monday, the Cavan supporters, the Cavan County Board, trying to find accommodation in Killarney in the middle of the tourist season, 5 days before.
Pat, you'd be robbing us at the best of times. The poor old Cavan man's going to get destroyed.
I know a few Cavan boys are looking to get a camp in someone's garden, Pat, if you can put them up with it for the weekend.
But spare a thought then for the Louth supporters who have to go to Donegal this weekend. What's on in Donegal this weekend? The Donegal rally. Jesus, try getting accommodation. Crazy.
I think, in fairness, Pat, you've kind of segued away from the Kerry performance nicely there. Just really quickly, Pat. Can you turn this around in this short space of time, given the players that you're missing, obviously, as well? Like, another game is hardly ideal. The draw might be somewhat favourable to you, or perceived to be favourable. But how difficult is this going to be to turn around for Jack O'Connor?
Sorry, Mike, the reality is, I was looking at the stats, they're playing Armagh, bar a complete anomaly statistically in a quarter-final. That's it. Like, they're going to beat Cavan. Now, Cavan, I was talking to a few Cavan people, they're a horrible draw. There'll be only a couple of hundred Cavan people, for all the reasons Pat mentioned. So can they get it up? And that's not to be unfair to Cavan, and I know Cavan people. The reality is, can they get it up now for an Armagh? Jesus, and I said it last week. That's the way it sort of felt like it was going. That's the game now. And if they can't get up for that game after last year, well, now that they couldn't have asked. Actually, they couldn't have asked for a better outcome, really. Yeah. After that shock horror, you know.
Clutching at straws, Michael, you'll say, right? They're back on the horse quickly. A week turnaround is probably the best thing, that they haven't 2 weeks to dwell on a bad performance. It's certainly a wake-up call, and I agree with Dick. I mean, Cavan are coming into this game on the back of a 13-point defeat by Tyrone and a 19-point defeat by Donegal. So it's not looking good. But the bottom line is it was such a flat performance, and albeit 6 players injured. But God forbid, I mean, the key player we've noticed in the new rules, Paddy Clifford. Paddy Clifford is the link man. Paddy Clifford is the key player. And when Paddy Clifford is absent, Kerry attacking play is limited. And God forbid if anything happened, David Clifford. But it's worrying times for Jack, worrying times for Kerry supporters. We're not in crisis.
I think that's a great draw for them if they had been going in against any of the other teams, because I do think Armagh, they're not perfect, but they need a team facing them that has something more than just the talent in their team to raise a game. And Jesus, if there's anything in Kerry and those boys after the way they were beaten and they left that game behind them, which they still feel they've got all the ingredients for a massive performance in Croke Park in 2 weeks' time against Armagh. And that's not to be unfair to Cavan, but they've almost sort of waved the white flag themselves on that. And it's perfect preparation because they didn't expend any bloody energy against Meath, all right? So they'll not be fatigued. And the game against, that'll be as good as a good training session to bounce back. So it's set up now for Kerry to bring a huge performance.
The bottom line, Michael and Dick, and as I mentioned earlier on, the bottom line, with the top 6 or 7 teams, I could give as many weaknesses as strengths with all of them, including Armagh, Galway, Dublin. I could list. So this was the wake-up call. Kerry up to last week, I thought, they're in pole position. This weekend, because Kerry people do highs and lows in Olympic terms, so it's very low this week, and now it's a write-off. But I certainly wouldn't write off Kerry. I'm not writing off any of the top 6 or 7 teams, because this is the great thing about this year's championship. This, in my opinion, is the most open championship in a long, long time, and you could give 6 or 7 teams. Name 7 teams. What are the 6 or 7 teams? And I'm including Monaghan now because they're really up there. But you take Kerry, you take Donegal, you take Galway, you take Tyrone, you take Armagh, you take Monaghan. Throw another one. You could give a case for all of them.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut across you, Dick, because we're really, really caught for time here. Just want to give credit to Meath. I think when Meath beat Dublin, it was all about what Dublin did wrong or what Dublin didn't show up. When Meath beat Kerry, they've beaten Kerry and Dublin in the 1 year. It's all what Kerry did wrong, who Kerry were missing. In fairness to Meath, they were brilliant again at the weekend. And I don't think many people would have said at the start of the year that Meath would be directly into a quarter-final and that Monaghan would be directly into a quarter-final as well. Dick, unfortunately, time is against us, so we're going to have to chat about Monaghan another day. But they were brilliant. They were brilliant against Down in what was, the perfect advertisement for what modern football is.
I'm going to dust down my Monaghan for Sam saying that Pat rubbished at the start of the year. Remember that, Pat? I had to say a prayer to some saint.
Sam who?
Ah, there we go. I'll dust it down.
keep your powder dry for the next day. Gents, thanks very much. You've been super as always. We'll talk to you again soon.